Don't give powers to an institution if you fear they will be exercised by your enemies when they come into power. Oh, don't worry, that's not going to happen. And now, telling them, say, look, wake up, man. Look at what has been done. And to their credit, some people are rediscovering federalism on the center left. And I hope that that continues, because it's not a philosophy for one political faction or another. The Constitution is for us to be able to live together under a system of laws and to coexist peacefully, regardless of differences of political views, of religion, and other things that might divide us. We can be united as Americans living under our constitutional order. And that means it has to be a limited government. Don't be so foolish just to think, oh, we'll give all the power to our person who's in charge. Well, that power is going to be used against you later on. And I think that both Republicans and Democrats and independents and everyone else should wake up and smell the coffee. Concentrated power is dangerous.
I don't think I know a more prolific writer than Tom Palmer with Atlas Network. And you've been able to look at systems of government around the world. Our Constitution was unique. It was something of beauty. It was inspired. And it's the only document I am aware of up to that time in history whose purpose was to limit the power of government, not to justify the power of government. Between that and the Declaration was that government's job is to protect my liberty from government oppression. First of all, how badly has that been perverted over the years? And is there any other country that has emulated us as well with a document that strong?
Well, there were many that were inspired by the United States. Think about Swiss Constitution and the Belgian Constitution, lots of others. The Bulgarian Constitution of 1878.
Oh, yes, the Bulgarian Constitution. I know it well.
So the U.S. set a kind of model, and many other countries did copy that. The Greek Revolution of 1821 was very much influenced by the United States. So that set a model, and many countries and leaders around the world looked to that. So it was really an inspiration for them. For a variety of reasons, the U.S. has lasted longer, been more stable. I would challenge what you said just a little bit, tweak it. It does authorize the government to do important things, to provide for the common defense, for example, to provide judicial power.
To build roads, to have post office, to coin current.
Right. Those are important, but those are limited functions. And the key is that those powers are delegated, enumerated, and therefore limited. And the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution are, in my opinion, the crowning glory of the American constitutional order. The 9th Amendment says the enumeration of certain rights in the Constitution shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So you have more rights than they wrote on the list.
Stop there for a second, because there's a big 10th Amendment move, and I support it. The 9th Amendment, it's kind of like the 3rd Amendment. People don't think about the 3rd Amendment because we're not quartering troops anywhere in private homes. The 9th Amendment said, hey, just because we didn't mention these rights doesn't mean that the people or the states don't have those rights. Help me understand that. What does that mean?
Think about like the right to travel, for example. It's not an enumerated right. The right to keep and bear arms, the right to a peaceful assembly, petitioning the government, freedom of religion, those are enumerated rights.
Right.
The right to travel is not. But you do have it. You shouldn't have to ask the state's permission to go from Wisconsin to Minnesota or to leave the United States and go to Mexico or Japan. Those are rights that you have. And that actually was litigated at the Supreme Court when the U.S. had denied passports to people. By the way, this is currently being discussed by the Trump administration, revoking people's passports on the say-so of the Secretary of State. This is, I think, manifestly illegal and frightening, frankly.
It goes against what Reagan said when he had that conversation with Gorbachev, where Gorbachev said, we all have guns on our borders. And Reagan said, difference is our guns point outward, yours point inward.
That is important. And we don't want guns pointing inward to keep us from leaving the country if we want to go visit someone in Canada. That's an unenumerated right. but a very, very important one. The right to marry a person of your choice who agrees to marry you.
No
That's
one,
not
no one is that
enumerated.
still silly.
Well, the fact is that there were states that had prohibitions, for example, interracial marriage. Those were struck down. So the fact that there's enumerated rights, these have a certain special weight, but there are unenumerated rights as well.
Let me push you on this, because I hear about rights today very different than the rights I heard growing up. Of course, we have the right to marry who we want. Of course, we have the right to travel. We have a right to property. We have these rights. But I'm also told that we have a right to health care, that we have a right to housing, that we have a right to food. We have a right to be given stuff, that is our right, and that therefore somebody else has to provide it. I don't understand how I can have a right that is dependent upon somebody else's labor. But does the Constitution protect my right to housing, my right
No,
to health
clearly
care?
not. There are two, what you might call positive rights that are in the Constitution. The right to legal representation in a court of law. If you're being prosecuted and you can't afford an attorney, you do have a right that they appoint someone to defend you. And then a right to a trial by jury, which requires that a jury be assembled. But those are the only two that are specifically numbered in the Constitution. And those are important procedural rights to maintain a system of justice, without which it would collapse. People have a right to representation, and they have a right to a trial by jury, which is a really important part
These are
of limited government.
expensive rights that
They
we,
can
the
be.
people, have to provide to somebody else.
That's right. But it's very different from a right to dental care, or if I remember in the state of California, it was discussed a right to self-esteem.
Right to self-esteem.
Yes, we have a right to self-esteem. And other rights of that sort. Those require some action by other people. It puts them under a burden or an obligation. And I think that doesn't qualify as a right. A right is something that I can assert that doesn't necessarily burden you. For instance, the right not to be killed, the right not to be beaten up. It imposes an obligation on others not to do those things, but they're negative obligations. All you have to do is not do something, as opposed to having to go to work and work from January 1st until May 15 to earn the taxes to pay to support another person. That claim of a right is a claim to basically the life and freedom of another person. And I don't think those are justified.
I had one person explain it to me this way. If 100% of everything you earn is given to another person, we call that slavery. So what happens if only half of what you earn is given to somebody else? Is that being half a slave? And that's why I believe anything that taxes above the core functions of government really is theft.
Well, theft, I think, just to be very accurate, slavery is a very strong term because you cannot be compelled. A slave is compelled. If you don't pick the cotton, they beat people and lashed them and did terrible things to them. So those people were compelled. You're not compelled to earn more money or go to work. If you do go to work, it's going to be taken from you. So it's not exactly the same as being a chattel slave, but it does mean that whatever you do is subject to the control of another person. And I think there's objections.
From my point of view, it means you cannot keep what you've earned. It is not yours. I think that is a sin to the human soul, first of all, but also I think it's a dangerous precedent. All right, get to the 10th Amendment.
That's the other element, and it fits so neatly with the 9th Amendment. It says that the enumeration of certain, let me think about it carefully, powers in the United States.
Those powers not reserved to the
Right.
federal government, retained by the states and the people or the people.
Respectively, yes.
Yeah. See, I got there.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, my memory's a little bit. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. In other words, if the power is not on the list, they don't have it. If they don't have it. The other element is, of course, the necessary and proper clause, that in Article 1, Section 8, Congress may pass all laws necessary and proper to the fulfillment of these
Enumerated authorities, right.
And so you said, see, they can do anything that's necessary and proper. But those are limiting terms, proper and necessary. first off, to be necessary means there's no other way to achieve that end than doing this. It is necessary to it. So all those other means are eliminated and they're unconstitutional. Then it has to be proper. That tells you that some are improper. What are the improper ones? They violate some other principle of the Constitution. They violate a principle of the common law. They violate common morality of human interaction. Those are improper, and that means they may not be utilized. So those are, again, further limitations on the powers of the federal government. You see this adumbrated or set out firstly in the Declaration of Independence. It's very clear about that governments may act on the consent of the people. And it refers to just laws, not all laws, or rather, I correct myself, just powers. Some powers in the hands of the state, some are not. And only those that are just may be exercised legitimately, which means many powers are unjust and therefore not legitimated.
I think we forget that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. And that the federal government is a co-equal, that Colorado is its own government, and we cede certain things to the federal government. However, every time there is crisis, the power grab of the federal government over the states continues, it seems like, in only one direction. The Civil War was, I think, the first big consolidation of power in the federal government. Then you had World War II, and then you had LBJ, and then you had Obama saying no, healthcare, and then more and more power keeps getting concentrated in Washington away from the states. I'll go one further. Every time Congress creates a new agency, a new set of bureaucracies, the executive branch gets to write all these laws. So the president over the history of our nation keeps getting more powerful and more powerful because they get to interpret and how to run the EPA and the Energy Department, the Education Department, all this other stuff. And now that Trump is in power, a lot of people on the left are going, the president has too much power, to which I go, duh, you guys created a system where the power keeps growing in the executive. So 2 observations, the states lose power and Congress gives away their power. How right or wrong?
I think that's on point. The historical line, I'd add a few points. World War I was very important in that time.
But every time there's a crisis, the states lose power, the feds gain it.
And individuals tend to lose it also. So that's a very important element. You know, going back when we had Democratic presidents, I would tell my center-left Democratic friends, don't give powers to an institution if you fear they will be exercised by your enemies when they come into power. Oh, don't worry, that's not going to happen. And now, telling them, say, look, wake up, man, look at what has been done. And to their credit, some people are rediscovering federalism on the center-left. And I hope that that continues, because it's not a philosophy for one political faction or another. The Constitution is for us to be able to live together under a system of laws and to coexist peacefully, regardless of differences of political views, of religion, and other things that might divide us. We can be united as Americans living under our constitutional order. And that means it has to be a limited government. Don't be so foolish just to think, oh, we'll give all the power to our person who's in charge. Well, that power is going to be used against you later on. And I think that both Republicans and Democrats and independents and everyone else should wake up and smell the coffee. Concentrated power is dangerous. And it's not just when a bad person gets into office. It's dangerous in anybody's hands. And we need to focus again on the principle of limited powers and unenumerated rights of the people, which is you have the right to do what you want unless there's a good and compelling reason to restrict you. But the burden of proof is on those who would restrict your liberty, not on those who would exercise it.
The left likes to call people haters and Nazis and fascists. There has just been pushed around so often, you're a hater, you're a fascist. And I think it leads to the violence that we saw with Charlie Kirk. This is an existential threat. Fascism is bad. They're stealing our democracy. Therefore, it's reasonable to shoot people over it. The left seems to think that there's a difference between socialism, maybe communism, and fascism. I look at this and I go, I don't really see much of a difference. They're both command and control structures over an economy and a people. And I don't understand how they point at each other and go, you're evil, no, you're evil. Both of these things are totalitarian elites running our society, and human beings lose their power, their dignity, and their independence. What's the difference between communism and fascism? I mean,
they're both philosophies of violence, and the assassinations that we've seen in recent months are simply horrifying. Not only did they leave children without their parents, which just really grips you in the heart, that's so terrible, but they're attacks on our freedom in the process. So think about Melissa Hortman and her husband assassinated in Minnesota. She was leader of the Democratic faction in the state
but they
legislature.
were moderate Democrats. They were not hardcore.
Well, that's the point. But they were killed because they were Democrats. And then the other Democrat and his wife were grievously wounded. And then Charlie Kirk, I mean, we'll find out as this case unfolds, but assassinated in cold blood because someone, as far as we can tell, didn't like what he was saying. Thought that was sufficient to extinguish a human life. Those philosophies of violence are leading us in the direction where people find it harder to live together. And that is a recipe for the emergence of dictatorship. And I think civil society needs to step up and say, can we learn to respect each other as fellow citizens, even with big disagreements that we might have, but to start by saying, I'll listen to you, and maybe you'll listen to me, and we can figure out a way for us to live together.
Those are nice words. I saw something, it was in the Wall Street Journal, a poll showing over the generations, the younger you are, the more open you are to the use of violence for political ends. And I see that turning. I see this polarization going. I don't see an end to it. I mean, we can say, thoughts and prayers. We hope people respect each other, and that's well and good. But even after Charlie Kirk's death, to hear people say, well, it was wrong to kill him, but he was a bad person, and what he said was hateful. They're basically saying, yeah, I need to say it was bad that he was killed, but really, I'm glad he was killed.
Maybe some people are saying that, but we have to say that the freedom to disagree, which means someone could say, I disagreed with all of his opinions, and I'm shocked, horrified, and find this appalling that someone murdered him. That's perfectly consistent with being a citizen of a free country. So it doesn't have to come out that suddenly I have to agree with Melissa Hortman or Charlie Kirk to condemn their murders. I don't have to.
But do you see this polarization getting better in America?
No, but it can. And when you say, do I predict it? Not necessarily, but it can change. And one of the things that happens is a revival of civil discourse among persons, not to immediately go and say, we're going to arrest you. And I'll just be very frank, the Trump administration has upped the ante, talking about arresting journalists, shutting down organizations. Anyone who had been critical of Charlie Kirk in the past is now going to be afraid of being arrested by this Trump administration because they created a climate of hate and terrorism. That's simply not right. A person who, as he did, he was a very controversial and provocative person. He liked to start arguments with people and see where they went. Well, that meant people openly disagreed with him and were highly critical of him, as he was of them as well. That's okay in a free society. But now we're being told that anyone who disagreed is going to be investigated and prosecuted. The head of the FBI, the vice president, and the president have all said this. This should scare everyone, regardless of their political party, that if you had expressed an opinion, you may be investigated and possibly, who knows, imprisoned. They're talking about denying passports on the basis of what the Secretary of State says, not on a legal procedure or process. So I think it's important not just dial down the rhetoric.
I agree with you
but
on
to
all
focus
that.
on a society of mutual respect.
But there isn't mutual respect. What happened before this was that people couldn't have free speech in their workplaces. They couldn't say things that they wanted to, or otherwise they get kicked out of school. They can't have a Trump sign in their house, otherwise they get a brick through the window. So the cancel culture, yes, one is directed by the state, which is much worse, but I think there's a reaction because people feel like they have been stifled and that their free speech has been taken for so long that now it's their turn to give a taste to the other side.
Isn't that the scary thing, though? Instead of saying, can't we move to a society of mutual toleration and respectful disagreement, people are saying, oh, now we have the reins of power, we're going to punish the other people. Anyone who favors the American heritage of liberty should recoil from that.
You say
Absolutely.
you don't predict that things are going to get better. What do you predict? Be realistic.
I'm very worried about the state of freedom in the United States because of the things you've been describing, this payback time. We're going to get back at people. That never ends well. And it scares me. I'll be very frank. I'm very frightened about
And that
the future of this country.
manifests how?
Well, right now, all the threats that have been coming out about investigating the Ford Foundation because they supported an internship at a magazine 6 years ago, and the magazine wrote things critical of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
This is just not right. It's simply wrong. And whatever you think of the Ford Foundation, so I'm sure I would have some disagreements with their board on many issues, I don't think they should be shut down, as has been proposed by the vice president, because they have views that he doesn't share. This is the direction we're going into. And by the way, it's true the Obama administration had walked on that territory as well, and were pushed back by the courts and public response. And I think that has to happen with this administration as well.
You are such a geek that not only do you walk around with a copy of Road to Serfdom from Hayek, but it's so tattered it no longer has a cover on it. What is the lesson from Hayek? Why do you hold his work so high? What is it we need to learn, particularly in this time, for those who aren't going to read the book, who aren't going to go backward in time? But what is it he predicted? What is the lesson?
What he was worried about, and a lot of people have opinions about the book without having read it, it's a very readable book, was that the move towards state planning and ownership of the economy would end up in serfdom, form of slavery. And his example was not the Soviet Union, it was Germany and Italy. He was Austrian, he spoke German, he left Austria and became a British
He wasn't talking
citizen.
about the commies, he was talking about the fascists.
Absolutely. And he talked about several things that come out very strongly that I think are resonant today. One is state ownership. The Trump administration is now acquiring companies, a golden share in U.S. Steel, to be executed personally by the president. Ownership in Intel. And the Secretary of Commerce has said more. We're going to buy more companies. We're going to have the state running the economy. This is scary. And this will not end well if we continue on that track. The other thing was when he said that deliberative processes, Congress, Parliament, City Council, was denigrated and it was time for the man of action. Well, this is what we're hearing right now. Action, boldness, no more talking. Tell the Congress to pass it. They're ordered to pass this, not to have any debate. And the American constitutional order was centered on debate. The Senate, above all, was to be a deliberative body. 2/3 of them are not up for re-election any election year, so that they can deliberate without fear of being smeared at an election campaign. That's a very important part of our constitutional order. And Hayek warned, when you abandon those two things, you're on the road to a slave society.
Those two things being?
Deliberative government, or these procedures of talking about things before you act, and then state ownership of the means of production and state control. And I'm afraid we've taken big steps on that road just in recent months.
This is a long, long road. And I know Trump scares many people in a lot of ways, but I look at it, and let's finish this topic here. Monetary policy is also a way for the state to have control.
Yes.
Whenever we have fiat currency, that is money made out of thin air, not backed up by any sort of commodity, well, then the government can just keep making
Sure.
and giving. And cronyism explodes, banks make money. We have all sorts of cronyistic things, whether it's the green energy. I've never seen any bigger cronyism from from that. We're in debt at World War II levels, but we're not in a war. We have obligations that are multiply higher than what we owe in debt.
Yes.
And every year, the Federal Reserve increases the money supply by 7%, and over time it doubles and triples, meaning that people's wealth diminishes. That, I believe, is the biggest existential threat to America, is the dilution of people's wealth through planned inflation.
I think that that's a serious issue, and I would point out the direction is bad under this administration as well.
Agreed.
The attempt to make the president the one who sets the interest rates, and he wants zero or negative interest rates. He's a real estate developer. They
But
like
keep in
that.
mind, it was FDR who set the prices of gold and took away our right
Oh,
to own gold.
Absolutely.
So this is no different than any other power-hungry president.
I think that this move has differentiated him for the last 40 years of presidents, though, and I find it very disturbing. The other thing you pointed to that's very frightening, but it's a bit medium to long term, is the unfunded liabilities. This is something I tell young people all the time. Man, it's time to start saving. Don't spend all your salary. Put them away in stocks, not bonds. Stocks, long-term growth. If you're 24 years old, when you get a raise, don't spend it all. Take a portion of it and put it into your savings plan. Because the unfunded liabilities, primarily Medicare and Social Security, are so huge, obligations to pay for which there's no corresponding source of revenue. It means that if you're a 24-year-old, you're getting, I think there's a technical word, screwed by this system completely. Because by the time you're ready to retire or qualify for Medicare, you've paid for mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, two sets of grandparents. You paid for all of that, and now there's nothing left for you. You are going to inherit staggering amounts of IOUs. And it's unsustainable. At some point, this has to be dealt with, and the sooner, the better.
Does the American experiment end?
Everything created by humans comes to an end someday. Everything we make will be broken. This coffee cup will someday be broken. And that's true of all human institutions. I hope it does not happen in my lifetime or in the lifetime of my great nieces and great nephews. But someday, it will. The longer that we can put that off and retain the blessings of liberty that the American founders intended for us, the better we are.
Very last question. Do you see the end of America as we know it in the next half century as a possibility or a probability, or not at all?
It's certainly a possibility. No question about that.
Probability?
In the sense of greater than 50-50,
Yes. And I know you love being optimistic. It's who you are. And I see your hesitation.
I'm struggling. I think we have an obligation to be optimistic because pessimism is
That's not what I
self-defeating.
asked, though.
I know.
What are you, a politician now?
No. But I'm talking about the attitude that I want to take into the future and that I encourage other people to take, which is optimism. If you're a pessimist, you'll turn out to be right. If you're an optimist, you have a chance of winning. And what I
If
want
you're a
to
realist, you can build a plan.
well, you can be realistic and optimistic at the same time. It doesn't mean being optimistic means closing your eyes. We should do both, and that's exactly right. Have a plan for the restoration of constitutional government, for the restoration of
Over
limits on power.
50%?
That we can succeed? Yeah, I'd say over.
I don't buy it. I saw it in your eyes. Hey, people want to read your stuff. You have such a library of work. AtlasNetwork.org is the best place to do it.
And I'll tell you, there's a book you can download at zero price. I'm an economist, so I don't call it free. It's called Development with Dignity. And if you put that in, Development with Dignity, and my name, or my co-author's name, Matt Warner, you go to the publisher's website. It has a little button that says Open Access. Click on it, and you get the entire PDF of the book. It's about how societies go from poverty to wealth. What are the ingredients, and what are the things that are at
And
risk?
your work and Atlas's amazing work trying to help those struggling poor nations move to wealth.
AtlasNetwork.org.
Tom, it's always fun. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.